Hi, I am Jandra, an ICE 50 avatar, and will present this interesting article. Proving fault. What is the tort of negligence? Whether or not a plaintiff can recover damages after an accident usually comes down to whether the defendant was negligent. Negligence is a legal theory that must be proved by the plaintiff in order to recover damages in most personal injury cases. Negligence is one of the most common personal injury causes of action. The term is so common that people often throw it around without fully understanding what it means. Let's take a close look at negligence, gross negligence, negligence per se, and contributory and comparative negligence. What is the tort of negligence? The majority of accidents happen because someone is careless. If this carelessness falls below a legally recognized standard, the person's conduct is considered negligent and the person is liable for any damages caused by their negligent conduct. To put it another way, negligence is the failure to exercise the appropriate level of care. Common examples of negligence include a driver who runs a red light, a driver who texts while driving, a store owner who fails to clean up a spilled drink in a timely manner, a doctor who operates on the wrong part of a patient's body. In jury's tip, negligence is a tort, but it is not an intentional tort. The chief difference between intentional torts and torts of negligence is intent. A lawsuit based on an intentional tort alleges that the defendant harmed the plaintiff on purpose. A lawsuit based on negligence alleges that the defendant harmed the plaintiff by merely being careless. How do I prove negligence? To prove negligence, the plaintiff, the injured party, must establish 3 elements. 1. Duty. The plaintiff must prove that the defendant owed them a duty of care. A duty of care arises when the law recognizes a relationship between the plaintiff and defendant requiring the defendant to exercise a certain standard of care to avoid harming the plaintiff. 2. Breach. The plaintiff must prove that the defendant breached the duty of care. A breach occurs when the defendant fails to meet the standard of care required. 3. Causation. The plaintiff must prove that their injury was caused by the defendant's breach of the standard of care. Establishing a duty of care. In most situations, the law imposes a duty on people to act with reasonable care, sometimes called due care, while performing acts that could foreseeably harm others. What is reasonable care? Reasonable care is the level of care that a reasonably prudent person would exercise in the same or similar situation. In some cases, however, the standard of care owed is more specific than the general duty to exercise reasonable care. For example, in some states, premises liability laws dictate that property owners owe visitors certain specific duties, such as searching for dangerous conditions before the guest arrives. In other cases, the standard of care owed is higher than the standard of reasonable care. For example, common carriers, those who transport people or property for money, typically have a duty to exercise the highest degree of care as opposed to a reasonable degree of care. Legal notice. This article is for informational purposes only and does not constitute professional advice. The views expressed in this article do not necessarily reflect those of ICE 50. One must consult with their legal representative for any and all legal advice.